Hey there, good morning, good evening, greetings, wherever and whenever you are. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you are here. Happy Friday, everyone who is here live as part of this broadcast. This is the Catalyst Astrology Report. We go over the astrology for the upcoming weekend and the week ahead just to get ourselves oriented to the cosmic time clock and cycles. Keep taking those deep breaths, my friends. They are going to be absolutely necessary as we go through the weekend and into next week. So we have a third quarter moon on the 17th, which is tomorrow, it's Saturday. And my initial title for this broadcast was Finding Your Place. And I changed it kind of at the last minute because I was like, oh no, I think we found it. It's now a matter of establishing that place within what otherwise may seem like a very fluid, perhaps even chaotic, and certainly changing environment around and within us. And one of the big abstracts or takeaways that I've got throughout just the course of my morning, through preparing for the broadcast, doing the Reiki healing attunement for today, doing that reading, is that we have to be impeccable. We absolutely have to be impeccable in terms of that place and establishing it. Because what I have found personally, and please let me know if you feel so called to share with us, if you're having similar experiences, that we've turned a couple of corners, right? And we're about to turn, and we are turning right now, a very big one. And it seems to kind of flip the script a little bit, and we find out that it's really not us that's actually hanging on to anything. And we may have been led to believe we're hanging on to something, that we're having a very difficult time letting go of the old structures that are clearly going through their own metamorphosis, that we are in resistance. But what I have started to find is, certainly as I've been going through the process of not only giving the Reiki healing attunements the last 2 weeks, but also receiving them, is the realization when you kind of shift your perspective and turn around and you're like, wow, maybe it's not really me at all that actually is hanging on, but it's these attachments, right? The karmic residue, these unfulfilled contracts, guilt and shame, certainly, but it's all of the stuff that ends up materializing from those particular thought forms, those energy patterns, whatever they are, actual entity attachments, right? However you conceptualize them. And even if you don't actually believe that there are distinct personalities as entities in different non-physical states that attach and come down through generation and generation, I personally do, but you don't have to, because they can be truly a projection of thought forms that have come through, again, generation after generation, through incarnation after incarnation, even just in your own life. Those projections become physical. They become, or at least they have a physicality. They have their own personality when we are projecting so much of ourselves into that. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that regardless of how you conceptualize it, what I've come to realize is it's in everything that's wrapped up in the materiality and the old matrix structures that are going through change, that are desperate to hang on to us. It's not so much that we're hanging on, and maybe some of us are. Many of us may actually be not even realizing that we are allowing that attachment to continue. But it's in the cutting of the cord and being like, bye, Felicia, that the desperation for those structures, those thought forms, those entities, those attachments, that karmic residue that can't come in to this next cycle of human evolution is clinging so much. If they can't make the jump with us, they will take people down with them and go back to their own, whatever that journey is, right? To go back and do physicality all over again, right? Go back to space dust, whatever it is. And I find that to be incredibly empowering and encouraging, and to realize, oh, again, you just, unhook the harness and let it fall away. And yes, we may need some very, very distinct and almost visceral reminders of how much that clamping on is is clawing and trying so much and using fear, right? Using, poking at our own wounds. Chiron, huge right now, huge right now. And if you're part of the Catalyst Classroom, link in the description box below if that's something that interests you or something you want to learn more about. We talked, the presentation that I gave this week is about Chiron and all these starseed stories. And I didn't know how it was really going to go, and how it unfolded. It kind of blew my mind. And there are some really powerful stories that are coming through Chiron to Andromeda, and will continue for Andromeda constellation and Tau Ceti in particular. And that story is pretty woven into, I think, a lot of what we're feeling right now, especially if you're really sitting with a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, a lot of sense of like, let's do something, and really being reactive as opposed to being responsive of a much bigger process unfolding. So all of that is out. So that's something that, like I said, you can link in the description box below to get more information about that. But Chiron is huge right now. It's huge because those are the wounds that are getting poked at or being brought up or being, the spotlight is shining on it. And to keep us in this old pattern or to allow these attachments to continue. And they won't continue. That's the thing. Like nothing can stop it. This is part of our journey around the galaxy as a solar system, and through the galactic plane, and what that means, and the ripple of the galactic current sheet, if you're following that type of science and astrophysics. However you want to look at it, the idea here is that we are evolving by hook or by crook, and anything that's not able to resonate at that next stage is not coming with us. And so that has come down to the physical level. And Alex Collier's last webinar, one of the things that he said that I really appreciated, and I am pretty sure I talked about it on Monday as well, is that we're going through the actual physical transition now, and that means a lot of physical stuff for people. It's been pretty brutal, I'm not gonna lie. It has been taking me to my limit and forcing me into a state of stillness and acceptance and trust that I don't think it's been, I think, a really long time, maybe never, in terms of the way that I am experiencing my own journey right now, to really just push, to expand the fear so out of my own field that it's not even relevant to what I'm experiencing. And when we talked about the Andromeda constellation, the Starseed connection, but even the Greek mythology related to the figure of Andromeda, there's this sense of really doing what needs to be done and having trust in divine intervention of some sort. That doesn't mean something is coming to save us. There's no coming of anything, aliens or Jesus, however you want to look at it. That's not what it is. We are our own saviors. We are the ones we've been waiting for. But we also need to invite that in. We need to make space for that in order to happen, and to actually trust it, not just tell ourselves and harbor these doubts and the worry and this sense of, but what if it's not? It's like you have to be the fool that is completely in touch with the instincts. And if you remember the reading from earlier this week, right on Monday, very much about using our instincts to trust what is coming. So again, there's been a lot that has happened even in just the last couple of days. There will continue to be more things happening. So I'm going to share a couple things with you before we really jump into it. We'll look a little bit at our star and what it's doing, just kind of get an idea of what to expect for the weekend. Surely, the Schumann is still blacked out. It's been, 8-9 days of darkness in terms of being able to measure the Schumann resonance. Apparently, this is the longest it's ever been blacked out, and I find that really interesting. I will be interested if it comes back online after 10 days of being blacked out. That would certainly pique my interest at the very least. So we'll take a little bit of a look at that, because there is going to be some upgraded solar weather, I think, over the weekend, just from some small stuff. But there was a pretty big flare that just went off this morning, and thankfully it was passing. It wasn't facing us, right? But it was big. It was close to an X class flare, and that is something to keep in mind as well, right? But there's no Schumann, right? We have no Schumann necessarily, except for our own intuition. So this is a great opportunity to kind of hone in on it within your own process and see if you can, feel into it without necessarily relying on the measurement of and the presentation of that particular data. Because what if it's never available again? How are you going to be able to measure those things for yourself? We become very reliant on these types of technology and mechanisms, and I am in full support of using the empirical scientific method to be able to collect data about all kinds of things that happen. But what happens when our technology is not available? When we have to start honing the organic technology that we already are, right? Just by virtue of being here, which I think is exciting and is something that a lot of people have absolutely no idea how to do, what to do, or that they can even do that. So perhaps this will be a mass awakening coming on the 24th that will open everyone up to that potential within themselves, even if it's something that they don't fully grasp yet consciously. So, but for us, it's about establishing our place. We've done so much work to get here, and it would be such a waste of energy, I feel like, to just like blow a fuse now, when we are so seemingly close to being the stillness in the storm. Well, we already are in some ways, but as the storm really starts to rage back up, it's like being in the eye of the storm and then coming out on the other side of it. Like the rest of the storm still has to come through. And I think the whole summer has been kind of like that. And August started to get really amplified. It was the beginning of like, okay, right, the eye of the storm is now passing by us. And now that we're full on into September, like we're in it again. So, but it's very easy to get pushed off course, to get pulled back into the old stories, to allow the attachments to continue to feed that negative script in your head, whatever it is, the health issues, the chronic issues. It's just part of the process of it really just, dissolving away. And Neptune is a big part of this weekend as well, because the sun is going to be opposite Neptune. And this, again, is where we need to be impeccable, because a transit like this, especially with Neptune in Pisces, the potential to get pulled back into bullshit is really high. And this is where the impeccable nature has to be in terms of what we are here to do, and to not get necessarily, swept away even within ourselves with what is happening at a socially unconscious level, which is a lot of the 12th house and what Pisces represents, right? It's the collective consciousness as an experience of togetherness and humanity. And that has feelings. That's not something you can intellectualize. That's just something that you experience. And it can be very easy to slip back into addictions and delusions and bypassing through fantasy land in a transit like this. And so being impeccable is really, really important. So what I'm going to do is bring up a little video to show you what our star has been up to these days. And then I'm going to check in with the stream here and see what's going on with y'all, and check in with the chat and just kind of touch base with everyone. So we're still chugging along with the Reiki healing attunement. It has been just mind-blowing and beautiful and really surprising on one hand, and also, oh yeah, this is exactly what we needed right now on the other hand. So I'm very grateful that I just followed my gut. Speaking of following one's gut in that moment, because it's something that I didn't plan. It was truly just inspired in the right moment. So let me bring up there we go. Bring up the space weather. Okay. All right, friends, let's see if it's actually going. Here we go. So what we're watching is our star. It's rotating. You see that big black blob is a coronal hole. And so we're going to get the solar wind from that coronal hole. It's already kind of starting, but this weekend. So you're going to see elevated activity when it comes to geomagnetic unrest and disturbance. But something else to watch is over here, if you look at the right side that's turning out of view, that it's doing all kinds of swirling and stuff. Well, at about 5 a.m., 6 a.m. almost Eastern Standard Time, there was a huge flare that happened. There it is right there. M7 class solar flare. So that's something to keep in mind too. Now, I mean, there's not, you can see some stuff going on over here that's coming into view. I mean, look at these plumes. They're probably bigger than our entire planet when it comes to the, the pushing out of the corona of the sun. So just be aware that there's going to be most likely elevated geomagnetic activity. Oops. That's not what I wanted to do for you guys. So let's check in with the stream here. VZ says, happy Friday. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here and being part of this process. And being part of the stream. I really do appreciate it very, very much. So I might as well just share a couple things real quick. So Catalyst Classroom, I already dropped this information for this week where we talked about the fixed stars and the starseed origins for Andromeda constellation, Tau Ceti, because this is related to transiting Chiron. We've been talking about Chiron as the Rainbow Road all month now. We talked about Alpha Centauri and the constellation of Centaurus, because that is the constellation that really memorializes Chiron, as opposed to Sagittarius, which is still a Centaur constellation as well, but it's more of the balanced centaur energy of truly half human, half material animal. And they're not nearly as civilized or as brilliant as Chiron. Chiron is closer to the spiritualized consciousness that is represented by Uranus than by Saturn, but he still has to contend with and eventually face the Saturn part of himself, which is the root of a lot of shame and guilt. And this is what we do as well when we work with our natal Chiron in the chart, that we realize that the things that tend to bring us down or bring us into a state of shame or guilt or pain or suffering are also the things that ultimately have tended to be our superpower when assisting other people or through similar processes. And as much as we want to oftentimes really help people with their own suffering, that does not release us from our own. And these Reiki healing attunements have been pretty clear about this Chiron energy in Aries right now, and then related to, everybody's personal journey. So that's something that's already posted for the people who are subscribers. I also want to share again that I'm going to be, let's see here. Oh yeah, so the equinox, right? The September equinox readings, the personal astrological forecast for September to December, right? Equinox to solstice, the whole season is available now. It's $99. It is definitely going to be at least a 90-minute reading. It'll probably end up being more. So this is on sale. You can go to catalystenergies.net. That's also linked in the description box, and be able to book that reading to see what the fall is going to look like for you if you're in the northern hemisphere, and if you're in the southern hemisphere, to get to see what the springtime holds for you. So that's available as well. And just to give you an idea here, the lunar transit forecast sale reading rate is now open for Libra and for Aries, because our next new moon on the 25th of September is in Libra. So the lunar transit forecast, 30 minutes or 60 minutes, it just gives you a snapshot of the month based on your own chart, your natal chart, your progressed chart, your starseed markings. And this is available for anybody who are sun, moon, or rising in either of these signs. This transit forecast sale is available to you. Also available to book at catalystenergies.net. All right, I'm going to move into really just reading the astrology, because this is what this is all about, this whole broadcast, right? So let me see if there's anything else that I really want to share with you guys before we move on. I don't think so. I think that we can move right on to the astrology, which I'm excited about. That's where I get the good, juicy stuff, is the astrology. And this is where we get to not accept our fate, quote unquote, although there is a certain amount of having to accept the impact of your own decisions, which is truly, fate is a cause and effect relationship. It's not like something outside of you is controlling your life, but astrology does give us a sense of the potential, right? The energy of these patterns, these sacred geometrical patterns that are created in the zodiac that show us the potential, right? Of what we can do, how we can make the most of it, what kind of challenges may present themselves to us. So knowing your chart really does help in terms of how these transits may personally impact your experience and your reality. So VC says, my intuition says it will be impeccable. We cannot mess up. God's source will not allow for it. Ooh, the universe has been conspiring for our success. It will not let us down. I totally agree with that. It's impossible for us to mess up, honestly, because we are on that sacred timeline. And it's not like it takes it's just kind of the same thing I just said. It's not like it takes our free will out of the equation. It's just that the momentum and the strong resonance, it's so powerful. It's like a magnet. Like, we can't actually resist it at this point. We can only make adjustments to our own experience and our own choices based on this, right? And I actually really agree with this, and not everybody does, right? A lot of people are either really still hyper focused on everything that could go wrong, and some people are kind of caught in this net of having to, it's not that focusing on the best possible outcome is somehow a bad thing or unnecessary, but it puts so much into our lap personally or materially to create everything. And we don't really let ourselves have a relationship with Source or God in that situation. So I love this comment, actually. The universe will not let us down. It's impossible. And I totally agree with it. And it will be impeccable, right? It may be uncomfortable. Okay, that's something that has been a really strong lesson for a lot of us that have been doing the Reiki healing attunements. And I'm sure many people in general, right, regardless of where you are in your journey. It may not be comfortable. It may be a little bit like, ooh, that's irritating, or, oh, I'm not comfortable confronting this, or being impeccable means that somebody's going to be mad at me, or I might have to say something that bothers someone. It's the same thing about those attachments that are desperately trying to hang on or hold us or make us feel like that we can't exist without it. He's just like, bye, Felicia, right? You just unhook the harness and off it goes. See ya. Right? Or the Fool, right? It's just like, I'm going to get away from you by just literally walking off this cliff here. And people think you're crazy, but then you like glide across it or whatever, right? And then they're like, ooh, how did they do that? What is up with them? And you will find that people are going to be like, why are you like so calm during this time? Why are you not freaking out? They're going to want to know your secret. And that's what you're here to do. You're here to be like, just come a little closer and feel the resonance and the frequency of my toroidal field. And then it'll be one of those moments where they feel better and they don't even understand why. That's one thing that was explained to me actually when I got my Starseed confirmation. And one of the things that the person talked about in terms of certain positions is that it made sense, right? And sometimes people just need to hear that they don't have to do this like grand like thing to establish your place. Sometimes you can go and just be somewhere, right? You can just go to the grocery store and you're in the grocery store and you're smiling at people and you're going to the checkout, and it's just a normal ass day with nothing extraordinary. But the people who were near you, their resonance, their field, their frequency was modulated by being in proximity to you, and that's all it took, right? And that was a lot of what happened with, the ministry of Jesus and Mary, right? They just had to be around people and they were changing. They were waking up. So also consider that's all you have to do, right? You don't have to have, boy, if I really thought that making a difference meant that I would have thousands or more of YouTube subscribers and like blah, 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 I'd be I wouldn't be doing this because I think I was failing. So I'm really glad for me and for everyone that is here and the community that is being established and created just by this space is having an impact everywhere, not just on the planet, but in our solar system, in our galaxy, in our relationship to the divine creator. Everything is having an impact, and it's also very equaled out, if that makes sense, right? Everybody's input and impact has equal weight, I guess, if you want to put it that way at this point, right? Because that's part of coming out of the age of Pisces into Aquarius, is that the Piscean age will find those people who step in to take on the burden or provide a sense of leadership or teaching or wisdom. And in Aquarius, it's all of us together, right? That is going to be a big part of coming into this next age. And we're learning how to do it now. We're coming into a process, I think, that is getting us set up for the big transition, which will be more like 2028 into 2030. So we got time, right? But right now it seems so like, and that's because there are big pieces that are being locked into place right now that are going to have an impact on how, we experience the next larger part of this puzzle, right? Just like if you've ever watched, there's this YouTube channel, I'll link it if I remember, it's called Mathstown, and it's just these videos of Mandelbrot sets and Julia sets and other types of fractal geometry put to music that is just infinitely unfolding in these different visual representations. Just watch that and you'll realize, like, oh, I see. This is really how it seems to work. And it's based off something really simple, seemingly, which is just an equation. One equation has this whole beautiful array that infinitely unfolds into these repeating patterns. But it's very difficult to see that they're repeating patterns without time that allows for it, at least for our minds. So I'm not going to go into Mathstown because that's a whole rabbit hole that I don't have time to go into right now. So we're going to get into the astrology, though, for today. And see where we're at. So today is the 16th of September, like I said. And if you remember from Monday and even beforehand, I talked about how it would be not mellow, but it kind of was, in terms of the astrology, but that the 16th everything would wake back up. And all you have to do is look at all of the bold lines on this chart to know that that is the case. And so the weekend is most likely going to be very dynamic. It may be a little dicey for some people and may find yourself really having to face some stuff or having that sense of reactionary output with Mars in a square to Venus. That is going to be very powerful, right? The energy that is generated from, Venus and Mars coming into a square, both in Mercury-ruled signs, and Mercury is retrograde, by the way, and will be in an opposition to Jupiter again. I think that there will certainly be tests, right? And I know for me, I'm going to be with the fam on our last family camping trip of the season. We're going up to Ithaca and the Finger Lakes, and I'm not trying to project any potential fallout, but I can see the potential it is presented. But knowing that means that I have an opportunity to be able to come at that or be present with that in a way that is not reactive, but is assertive, right? It's assertive, but also it is sensitive with Venus and Virgo, and patient and resolute in some ways, right? Taming that energy. And whereas Mars is wanting to basically, confirm a lot of things that it has been working with going through Gemini now for a while. And remember, Mars is going to station retrograde towards the end of Gemini. So it's going to still be here for a while. And so Venus kind of tempers, I think, in this square just a little bit, that it is so much more than just our own thoughts, our own ideas, consciousness that we want to project out, right? I do feel like there can be some harsh words, some very cutting and maybe anger-filled projection out in terms of expression and even what we're discovering. Venus in this square this weekend, I feel, is also just tempering that and giving us that sense of patience and resoluteness and real meticulousness about what it is that is maturing and ripening. And it's not to say that we shouldn't express ourselves, or if we have something that needs to be confirmed through some sort of conversation, that's there too, because we have to also consider that this area of Gemini, and of course the moon is here, right? The moon is going to be here through the weekend. So we're also way more emotionally kind of invested and connected to this dialectic process. And so we may find ourselves emotionally enhanced by Mars in that like outward expression, whatever it is. So if you're aware of that, then you can utilize this energy, lean into it, right? Know that there is patience in what is valuable, in what is beautiful, what is our magnetism, right? And what we are maturing and ripening. Yet it is important that we don't let go of the process of our own mind and consciousness, because if it's not for that, we don't have anything in Virgo to actually analyze and put together, right? The third house is, represents the pieces of the puzzle, right? You collect them, you bring them, it's what's right in front of you. And it's Virgo where you're physically putting them where they belong. So without any pieces of the puzzle at all, there is nothing to put together. So this is why I think it's important to give ourselves the opportunity to at least kind of feel in, be a little more sensitive to ideas. Maybe, like I said, Mars is going to be wanting to spit some fire verbally, if you know what I mean. And if we are not emotionally kind of in tune with the this or that, and we get emotionally invested in one side or the other, this could be kind of a spitting fire type of thing. So, be aware of your own emotions and what's motivating some of these as well. And it's Venus here. It's about more than just you, right? And what you have to say and how you feel. But what you have to say and how you feel and what you're discovering is still part of the equation. And so there needs to be an outlet somewhere for it as well. We can't just kind of sit back and not do and be complacent and not do anything, especially if we're being presented with opportunities to address or to lean into this square. So I'll show you that as we go through. This is because we're still on Friday. So I think Saturday it may be exact, but I'm not entirely sure. Let me check my notes here and see. And there's a sense of spontaneity. There's a sense of innocence and a fresh approach that the Sun in Virgo right now is really allowing us to identify with. A really heartfelt simplicity so that we don't get caught up in our own success and failure, right? Our ego, when we're on the spiritual path, this is where a lot of people, including myself, right? This has happened many times. We get on the path and then we get some traction somewhere and then we kind of, fall back into that Leo energy of just being glamorized and, our pride really swelling about it. Look what I've done. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. What this is saying that when the ego is feeding on that drama of struggle and victory, you kind of lose the point of it all. So there is something very important about keeping this simplicity, this innocence, this freshness at the heart of it and not get caught up in the drama. So you can already see how that is probably expressing itself out in other arenas and has been for a while. Mercury is in its retrograde. It's now like finally moving. It had been sitting in that 8 to 9 degree where it's stationed for a hot minute because it slowed down and now it's moving up again. So the thing about Mercury, it's already past this point. And so now it's about listening with Mercury retrograde. It's about listening. It's about the review. It's about the proofreading in some ways. But I really got a strong listening as opposed to as opposed to talking, right? The two sides of communication. And when we're talking about Libra, we are talking about the application of what we know in order to achieve balance. So we are receiving and listening with Mercury retrograde. And there's an important lesson here where today especially, where Mercury is, before it comes into its second opposition to Jupiter, which is when we release the energies from a new potential, right? You bring these two dialectic positions together and catalyze them and create something new. And so when that happens, just like I talked about with all the attachments, when we do that, we have to face the antagonism of those dark entities, those dark shadows, our shadow in a lot of ways, that is making itself even more known as we move into a new creative pattern. So if you are doing this, right, which we all are, this shows that whoever makes possible this new release of energy, and in what way, we have to accept the karma of both sides of it, success and failure, right? So this really fits in actually very nicely with where the sun is in at Virgo, so that we can keep this sense of innocence about it, but also be very thoughtful and and listening and really taking into consideration that just because we do something doesn't mean it's going to succeed in the way that our ego wants it to succeed, okay? That's something to consider. But this is about listening to some measure, whatever it is, knowing where Libra is in your chart and all this other stuff will really show you where in your life. But on the whole, accepting the karma of both possibilities when this new creative potential is released is part of what we are listening for. We've already gone to this point in the direct motion, and now it is in, like I said, in its retrograde. Let's see here. Lilith is about to come into, she's going to be moving into conjunction with the fixed star Sirius. It's actually going to be at the same time as the moon reaches Sirius, which is actually going to be the day of the Queen's funeral, which I think is the 19th. So if you think that wasn't planned exactly that way, then you are naive, right? So her funeral on the 19th is the day that the moon conjuncts Lilith, right? That means the moon is at the lunar apogee, the point furthest away from the earth, conjunct Lilith, black moon Lilith, in conjunction with the star Sirius, right? So we know that Sirius, regardless of what hand of the mystery school occult path you're practicing, Sirius is a big deal no matter what. So that's something we'll look at as we move, out of the weekend, because that's on Monday, right? And so the progression of Black Moon Lilith is now in retrograde in Cancer. So one of the things it's going to be doing is, well, like I said, meeting Sirius, but then the moon is going to come into Cancer too. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. So the moon is in Gemini, and as of this morning, it was in a trine to Mercury, it was in a sextile to Jupiter, and it is today that Venus is in a square to Mars, and the sun is opposite Neptune, and Venus is making a connection to the nodes of the moon. So that's a lot happening today. So again, impeccable. The sun opposite Neptune. The sun at 24 to 25 Virgo is a flag at half-mast in front of a public building. This is where the impeccability must come from, because this is where you know what it absolutely is going to take in order to fulfill your destiny, the social acknowledgement of a job well done. And so a flag at half-mast is where someone who has been full service to their community is being recognized by the community for their service. And this is where you do find your place in history. But I think we've already found it. It's about establishing it for ourselves, right? We don't need necessarily anything else or anyone else. And we certainly don't need the collective unconscious that's going through one of the biggest pure purges since the 19th century. We certainly don't need that to acknowledge or to give us a sense of what our place is, right? We have to identify it within ourselves. Again, this is why this transit can be very easy to be deceived again, right? To get pulled back in. But I think that many of us know exactly what it's going to take and what it has taken to get here. And just really singing and really resonating with that within our own hearts is going to be a lot stronger than it would have been otherwise, I think. So, and like we talked about Venus squaring Mars, and then we see that Venus not only is in a square to Mars, but Venus is in a relationship with the nodes of the moon, and in fact is in a trine to Rahu, or the North Node, right? The head of our dragon, the trajectory that our soul is moving towards in order to evolve right now, currently. And it's about braving the storm. I mean, the imagery of the Sabian symbols down to the degree is just striking to me. So Venus in this 15 degrees of Virgo is a reception in some ways. And when I say reception, on the surface, it seems like you are, again, just kind of being complacent or apathetic maybe. But really what it is that you're being patient and ready to welcome whatever is being offered to you to show you that you are on the right path. So the idea here is that without the root strength, the fruit and the seed that is embedded within is not going to be nearly as good, right? So the root strength is very important. And Virgo is all about ancestry in a lot of ways, and the strength of it, because it's the root system. It's that fourth house or Cancer energy. So from a esoteric perspective, this degree, 14 to 15 to Virgo, the initiate, whoever that is, at this point, it's all of us, who acts with determination, with courage, with discernment and discrimination. They receive some sort of symbolic prize, right, from that group that is ready to welcome those who have proven themselves on, quote, the battlefield where they meet their past, right, which tries to block their way. Okay, so Venus in this square to, like I said, in this square to Mars, where we're needing to clarify our experiences through actual contact, the experiences are still new and they're fresh, and we're kind of still working with them as if we were more of a younger mind in some ways. This is a degree of 14 to 15 Gemini, and this position demands a clean and open mind, eager really to test what is experienced in an exchange of views with your own peers, right? And so it seems like these things should be working together. But again, there's a piece of the intuition aspect that Venus is providing for within your body, within your physical material reality, right? Your resources of all kinds. What feels harmonious? What feels balanced? What feels resonant with your own field? Venus is the symbol and representative of that. And so this square, again, is testing us in some ways. And again, these are the masculine and the feminine. So when they square off with each other, boy, there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of energy there. So lean into it, my friends, and be impeccable. Say what you got to say. Talk to the people and your peers, really hash out, if you need to, these experiences. Maybe there's some conversations that really do need to happen. Maybe they are going to be motivated by a deep intuitive sense of what is being discovered and needs to be expressed, but also to not put all of your energy into that output and recognize that you may receive something out of that conversation or that expression or that even that just exchange of information that will show you that if you're on the right path or not. If you have been doing the work, I would say that's likely going to yield something. And there's a lot of blocking the way, and Mars definitely pushes past obstacles. And with the moon involved right next to Mars as this is happening, I think that there is an intuitive kind of sense of like, well, this is the obstacle here. And this is going to be really relevant coming into the weekend, because we have a third quarter moon, which is in Gemini, actually. So the bold lines still haven't really gone anywhere, have they? So it's still, as the weekend unfolds, it's going to still be a lot of energy to work with. So when we get on to the 17th, like I said, this is our third quarter moon, and it's going to be in Gemini. So where the moon itself is going to be, where it's going to be square, I'll bring it to you. It's the like 24 degrees and 58 minutes of Gemini and Virgo. Again, both Mercury ruled. Mercury is opposite, is soon to be opposite Jupiter, by the way. Jupiter ruling Sag, which is opposite here of Gemini. So, but what this really brings up for me, especially because they're both, again, they're both Mercury ruled signs that are going to be in square to each other. And you're talking about how we feel and how we express ourselves. And the third quarter moon is truly about reorienting ourselves with and internally, right? It's a crisis of consciousness. And perhaps there is this feeling in terms of the ideas and exteriorizing what we've discovered, what we've explored, what we have learned, that there's a lot of cutting back, right? There may be some things that we need to prune back emotionally in this area, whereas again, we may find the expression of like, no, this is what it takes. There's that impeccability again. And so it's not that there's one side or the other. It's the square between these two aspects of ourselves, just like Mars and Venus, right? You're talking about the masculine and feminine incarnate of Mars and Venus, what they represent, the emperor and the empress. Now, the sun and moon are more of these polarities within ourselves as an individual, how we feel and how we outwardly express ourselves, but it's the same dynamic, right? We're feeling into more of the information, what we've learned, what we've discovered, and also feeling this distortion of what needs to be cut away because it's just going out into nowhere, right? It's if you don't prune your plant, it just has all this wild expansion that does not allow for a consolidation of energy towards growing the fruit. And that is what Virgo is all about. And without the fruit, there is no seed. And without a seed, there is no perpetuation of life. And that is what we are here to do. So while there's this really strong identification with this public recognition or the flag at half-mast or whatever this is for you, what it takes, you know, establishing, finding our place in history, giving ourselves and being recognized for that service, even if it's just for ourselves, there's going to be this nagging thing of like, okay, there's some stuff down here. There's some stuff within my own patterns, right? The thing about the moon in Gemini in particular is that it's really very adept at being able to recognize patterns that otherwise your conscious mind doesn't really see because you're using your intuition or your psychic sensitivity or it's in your subconscious. So this nagging feeling of like, okay, we got to get this cleared away. I have to like reorient myself because if I let all of this stuff just, you know, expand out into everywhere, there is the energy necessary to actually bring something to fruition is not going to be there. So I think I think that we are going to be really facing this within ourselves over the weekend as well. Venus and Mars in their own squares is just making it much more incarnate, if that makes sense, through our reactions and our outward momentum and our sensitivity to our material value and inner harmony and beauty. You know, our relationships, the quality of our relationships, the quality of our material existence, our comfort, our security. But this is, again, about, you know, patiently growing the fruit that holds the seed, right? This is like the pregnant mama of Venus and Virgo. So, but the sun in Virgo is a different story. So it's the patience that's necessary. And this gives us a place to put some outward energy if we need it, which is kind of working with the polarization of our own consciousness, our own ideas, our thoughts, patterns. It gives us a place to work with it, right? Instead of just being like, okay, I'm just sitting here waiting for something to happen, right? I mean, it will shift as we shift. And part of that is doing the work in our own consciousness. So, I mean, Gemini is the third house, and that is the environment right in front of you. Now, Mercury and Jupiter also in opposition. Again, this is the second of 3 oppositions with their Libra Aries designations. And we want to, I think that there is a pattern that we are aware of, but don't understand the details of necessarily in terms of our own transcendence that Jupiter in retrograde is representing. So the Sabian symbol of 4 to 5 degrees Aries is a triangle with wings, right? It's a new dimension of being that can be envisioned, right? We can creatively mobilize ourselves and visualize it. Now, in the retrograde, it's something that is, you know, we've talked about this. It is like the bellows squeezing shut, or it is like the balloon that is contracting and the image on it is all distorted and there's no air in it, so it doesn't float, it doesn't rise, but it doesn't make it any less of a balloon, and it certainly doesn't make it any less of what image we have imposed on it. But in the retrograde, it is really squeezed the bellows together, which has effectively blown the air onto the fire that it needs, right? But we also feel the squeeze, right? The squeeze. And Mercury in its opposition in Libra, also retrograde, it's going to be 4 to 5 degrees Libra. And let me make sure that let me make sure I read this correctly here. Where did you go? I think it's actually the next day that it's going to do this. So put a pin in that, my friends, because we'll get to it. So we're still on Saturday when the moon is in a square to the sun. Now, Mars is going to be in a sextile to Chiron. That's what's happening on Saturday. You can see it right here. That also means the moon at one point was in a sextile to Chiron. So sextile is a 60-degree angle. It denotes some harmony and cohesion, but it's also needs an investment. It's something that we learn from going to the bottom of something and coming out with actual wisdom, right? So it's the 6-pointed star. It represents the transposition of two triangles, right? The 3 and the 3 imposed on each other, but opposite, right? So it does represent transmutation, inner transmutation. It requires that there is an investment or an action involved in actually being able to make this transition. So Mars and Chiron like this, where Mars is coming into the second half of coming almost into the second half of Gemini, and Chiron in its retrograde has now moved back into officially the first half of Aries. And I think the conversations, the need to objectively confirm things by talking to people, to have conversations, maybe to really spit some fire in some ways. Now, Aries is the home territory of Mars. I think that it will really shine a light and give us an opportunity to really look at ourselves and what is it that we're projecting into everyday reality that is either wholeness and fulfillment, or we are wrapping ourselves in our negativity, we're wrapping ourselves in fear and anxiety and worry, we're wrapping ourselves in someone else's projection of what is. This is a big one with Chiron, and the retrograde has been ruthless because, again, it's just like Neptune retrograde. There's a sense of not being able to hide from it right now because it's felt so deeply within us that it may not be obvious out there, but we can't hide from ourselves. And I love this sextile personally because I think it's going to relieve us of those old blankets that have been woven around us by way of actually talking to people. And maybe it will be forcefully, or maybe it will be assertively, but it'll be important how assertive it is because it will change the entire resonance of everybody down to the individual subjective level. And that's where it all starts. And Chiron in Aries, as difficult as it has been the thing we have to learn to transcend, right? To be able to bridge that part of ourselves to our spiritualized essence, our connection to the higher consciousness through Uranus and the upgrade that it represents. It may not be comfortable, but I feel like that this is like a purification by fire, and it's the conversation that is the air that blows into the fire pit and makes it bigger, right? Allows it to grow, and maybe that's part of the eruption that may transpire as we move actually into the 18th, when Venus is in 16 to 7 degrees Virgo, which is pretty obvious in terms of its imagery, which is a volcanic eruption. And something that I picked up from Dane Rudger in the astrological mandala for this degree is that everything must be released from the psyche if it's seeking to attain a transfigured state. And the soul must become empty, the mind translucent, and unless some form of purification by fire is experienced, the inner pressures of your karmic past are going to do so much more damage. I mean, I know that people doing the Reiki attunements with us, this group, knows exactly what I'm talking about. And we will be, instead of a dramatic release of energy that is destructive, it is just going to move through us in order to empty the soul, in order to release the psyche from, or release everything, all that karmic residue from the psyche, right? No, all contracts null and void at this point, because we are moving into a brand new state that we haven't been in as humans on this planet for a very, very long time. Probably about 26,000 years. But not everybody's going to have this experience. So please be gentle and be understanding and patient with people. Again, Venus in Virgo, and yourself too. You may find a flare coming out of you that you didn't even know you had, especially knowing where Virgo is in your chart will probably help. So at this point, the moon has moved into Cancer as well, and the sun is about to come into a trine with Pluto. Wow, this is one of those powerful and favorable transits where the energy that is released from Pluto, especially in Capricorn, I think really it gives us the opportunity and really stabilizes our own expression and spiritual identification and our own vitality, with all of this process being a divine play, right? It's even the most mundane tasks are practiced as a sacred tribute to divine source or God or the Great Spirit. When you can think of things that way, when you can actually express yourself through that type of activity, you see how it is in this Earth trine with Pluto retrograde that is essentially wiped out every pathway up the mountain that we can think of, and forcing us basically to transform what that even means at a societal and institutional level, which is part of the attachment, right? Is Pluto is taking everything down with it, and we get to decide if we're going down with the ship, and that's a choice, right? On some level, it may not be a conscious choice for many people, but it was a choice in certain things. But it's even with something like that, there is a way to identify with that activity or that choice being part of the sacred plan. And this is very stabilizing in our own identity with something so powerful with Pluto and Capricorn that it seems like it will take us down. So, and this is when Mercury and Jupiter are going to come into their opposition on Sunday, the 18th. So Venus, it looks like Venus and Lilith come into a sextile on the 18th. And let's bring up this. I want to bring up this. That's Sunday, by the way. Mercury. There we go. Mercury and Jupiter opposite each other on the 18th. And The moon is in Cancer. It's actually going to be in a T-square with where Jupiter and Mercury are in opposition. And this degree really is the karmic readjustment that is going to be necessary if we try to pit ourselves against the will of society. And I know that sounds pretty daunting, but imagine that you've parked your car on a railroad, at a crossing, and it stalls, and you're like, and there's a train coming, and you're desperately trying to start it back up and get out, and you barely survive with your life because you've had to jump out of your car, and that car gets absolutely smashed by this speeding train. That's where the moon is going to be in a T-square to Jupiter and Mercury. And, T-squares show us where... Here, I'll go back just an hour. You'll be able to see it very visually, actually. There it is. Beautiful. So you see the T-square right here. And oftentimes these T-squares, as much as they are providing attention with both ends of the opposition, it brings the energy down to a point here, which is if we try to pit ourselves against this speeding train that's coming with our, with our car that's stalled on it's stalled out on the tracks, we're in deep trouble, right? And so you may just barely get out with your life, and not everybody's going to even realize it's happening, okay? And they're just going to get smashed. Now, this is where the energy in our own feels, right? Especially in Cancer, moon in Cancer. It's deep, it's sensitive, it's intuitive, there's psychic sensitivity, there's a sense of really feeling into where our own power is coming from, while Mercury and Jupiter, representing the mind and the higher mind, are pulling on each other in fire and air signs. And remember, they're both retrograde. So they both are internalized. They're both experiencing more of a contraction in its energy. Mercury, like I said, in its retrograde, we're really listening as opposed to outputting any kind of message and being really still with it. And there is a transmission that's coming from Mercury, right? There is really, when the pupil is ready, the master appears. And it's not always about a master, but it's about the mastery that is revealed through the teacher. So it's not necessarily a guru, although you may have a physical person who comes along that can be your teacher. But this is more about the transmission of truth through some sort of symbol of a teacher or a guru or whatever, right? And there's a necessity for youthful spirits or just the new part of ourselves to learn from someone or something that has gone through this experience as well. So this is our inner master with Mercury retrograde, again, listening to our guidance. Now, Jupiter is over in Aries going, I can transcend myself, right? I can do it myself. I can just sprout wings over here and just fly away. And that also may be exactly how we get out of that speeding, how to get out of the stalled car and the speeding train, while Mercury's over here listening so intently to what's the message? Where's the transmission, right? So really getting kind of almost hyper-focused on that, where Jupiter is pulling the energy of understanding and big picture about who we are subjectively. It's you can just transcend whatever, right? At any given moment, you can identify this new quality of being and creative mobilization. I think getting out of the way of the speeding train emotionally and using our sensitivity is going to it's really going to save us in a lot of ways if we see it that way. It's not to say that we shouldn't be sensitive to this transmission, to the guidance, but maybe we're not ready, and maybe that's we're sitting there waiting, thinking God's gonna save me from the speeding train, and it's no, you have to get out of that car and realize that if you try to pit yourself against the deluge that is like a speeding train, you are in trouble. So that's something to keep in mind as we come into Sunday, right? Because it's just building and building and building. What else is happening on Sunday? So we have the T-square, we have the actual exact opposition, we have the sun in a trine to Pluto retrograde, and this is where we really, it's not even just practicing, we are following a very refined set of actions and function that we have. It's not just us, it's something we've been part of, something that goes beyond just us. We're part of a lineage in Virgo, and that again is going to be something that sustains our identity, our vitality, our expression in this Pluto retrograde, like I talked about before. So that's Sunday. So I want to come into Monday and we will just look at the basic ideas here. So you're going to see that the moon on Monday, the moon and Lilith are going to come together at Sirius, and they are going to make a connection to the moon's nodal axis pretty much all at the same time on Monday morning, East Coast time. So if we go ahead a couple more hours and just kind of look at where everything is, yeah, I see here. And it's going to be in a square. This whole thing will be in a square to Chiron. So Syrian starseeds, you're going to get a huge activation. Just know that, again, the energy of this situation is going to be more resonant than any of us may have ever felt, just because of the nature of what's going to be happening on the 19th, which is the funeral, right? The actual funeral for the Queen of England. And having all of this happen at the same time is pretty substantial and really drawing us into deeply within ourselves, within the human blueprint in general, the Lilith energy of the space in which divinity can actually inhabit. We're gonna really feel into how do we integrate ourselves into the situation? How do we actually use this energy? Or how does braving the storm or feeling this pull towards the braving of the storm, how is that going to activate and alchemize this connection to the infinite root of all life? Because that's really what you're tapping into when you cross Sirius, right? Is the void, is the darkness. And when you have the moon and Lilith at this point, I mean, it is exceptionally powerful. And to have a female monarch, without getting too much into my personal feelings or any designations about this person and their role, it's very intentional. It's not an accident that this is all happening. And you see, and it's in a square to Chiron. So again, there's going to be some real vulnerability and some rawness that's truly getting poked at in terms of, well, what are we wrapping ourselves in that's going to fulfill us, right? And the square here is going to be all of this intensity, all of this deep intensity down to the root of life, which can be really hard for people if you are not already comfortable in this type of space. So what else is happening? We have Mars, we have this square, we have the nodes involved. Venus is coming into her trine with Uranus, right? There's that swimming race that is, well, right? We all have somewhere that we're going and we're going together, but this is about how we're each performing at our personal best. And Venus, again, representing our relationship to the material world through comfort, security, beauty, harmony, a sense of value and worth. I think we'll have this sense of like, oh yeah, okay, I see that, motivated in some ways to continue to be patient, to continue to be focused on what we are ripening and maturing. And again, it will allow a stabilization with Uranus and Taurus, where you may find that this is kind of the day when the crash, it's very possible. I feel like it's been, there have been a number of these transits connecting to Uranus in Taurus that have been part of this. So I wouldn't be surprised. The price of gold is just dropping and dropping and dropping. And that to me is a pretty good indication that they're manipulating it in order to buy up as much as they can at a very inexpensive rate before truly the bottom falls out. So I wouldn't be surprised. Also, the moon opposite Pluto at the same time time. Where is it? Oh, it's Procyon. So there is that Procyon story coming back also on the 20th. And there's not much, that's Thursday the 20th, or Tuesday the 20th. Wednesday the 21st is pretty mellow. Thursday is when we have our equinox, which is late in the day or evening of the 22nd. Thursday. So on the East Coast, it's going to be roughly 9 p.m. when the sun moves to 0 degrees Libra. So that's going to be late on the 22nd, or at least in the evening on the 22nd. And then the 23rd, right? We're getting to this really remarkable day here. The 23rd is Friday. It's the day that the sun and Mercury come into conjunction in a cazimi, and Mercury will be retrograde. The sun will be at 0 degrees, 0 to 1 degrees Libra, and then Mercury moves back into its home of Virgo. And at this point, the moon is truly coming into its balsamic phase because it is now in Virgo. We started this lunar cycle in Virgo, and we also see another connection with the moon and Lilith in Cancer. But this is, on the cusp here of this date of the 24th, where we have Venus and Mercury and the moon all kind of within 10 degrees of each other, opposite Neptune. And then the sun at 1 to 2 degrees of Libra. And then we're going to have the new moon on the 25th, which is 3 degrees Libra. So, and you can see that we're getting a square with Uranus and Saturn now. It's not going to be exact, but it's pretty darn close with each other, within a degree. And so that square is going to be very palpable. And when you have Uranus and Saturn in a square to each other, I mean, this is a tower moment, isn't it? Because one is the security and the fortress, and Uranus is the lightning bolt. So when they're square to each other, it's pretty good indication that you're going to find something akin to that. And then you have this opposition to Neptune in Pisces still, and it's retrograde. And this is where we establish our place. This is where, in the face of everything that is necessary within ourselves to really master and perfect, it is the dharma that we have to accept about ourselves and establish our place that is going to help us find a balance here. And then, like I said, we come into the 25th, and then we have our new moon in Libra, and Mercury back in Virgo, Venus, like I said, opposite Neptune, still pretty strong as well. And then Venus in a trine to Pluto. So by that point, we'll have so much, there will be so much to talk about by this point. I am assuming that we'll go into more detail about all of this stuff when it happens. So my friends, I think I'm going to leave it there for today. I'm just kind of checking in with the chat real quick. And VZ says, remember, with all these deep emotes coming up, to only judge yourself by the intention of your actions and the strength with which you face the challenges that have stood in your way. You are not at fault for how often others feel or react, or how others feel or react. We all can control it if we choose good or evil. Exactly. And it really can be difficult when your entire MO for your whole life has been to appease or to hide yourself or to not even give yourself a voice in the face of other people so that you can keep the peace, right? And we all make mistakes. We all have things that we wish we hadn't done. But, oh, Emily, I miss your face too. So good to see you on the live. It's been a while. Yeah, to just be easy on yourself, like VZ said, to judge yourself by the intention of your actions, but also to take responsibility for yourself when the impact of those actions may not be exactly it. Just like with that Mercury, in Libra, right? That you have to be responsible for the success and the failure if you are choosing to release energies through a new potential. And then a lot of people will just not do it in order to keep from having to step into that self-responsible place. But if there was ever an Andromedan starseed component that is so relevant to this, it is being self-responsible and being able to face things and the disappointment or whatever, the reactions of other people without getting defensive, but also without taking it personally and still being able to accept the responsibility. If you got to say, hey, I was wrong, you say you were wrong. If you have to say, I'm sorry, you say, I'm sorry. I've seen a couple videos now of people who, after the last, 2 years, basically, and especially since the last year with the cootie stick, I've seen a number of personal videos of people being like, the people that really pushed against that, or at least took a stand and were not going to participate, they turned out, these are people saying it, you turned out to be right, and I'm really sorry that I didn't listen. And I've seen a couple of these now. I don't know if we'll ever see like a generalized acknowledgement, but this is not just about one group of people. We all are going to come up against these emotions, and there will be, most likely, if you're interacting with anyone at all, right, unless you're in a bubble, and even then I'm sure it'll come up. It's important to realize you probably will. There's a likelihood that you will say something that you didn't mean, or in a moment of reaction that you may blurt out something. But it's okay, right? Keep just keep it easy, right? And like VC said, you don't have to judge yourself. And the strength with which you face the challenges that have stood in your way, right? And sometimes we need to stand even more firm and know who we are. And sometimes we need to tap into our integrity and realize that if we want things to change, we have to start by changing from the inside out. So it's going to be a mixed bag, but I think it's all going to kind of go towards the same place. I'm really curious about how next week is going to unfold. There's a lot of energy that is getting stirred up in every direction around how the end of next week is going to look. I'm sure that by the time we get to the new moon in Libra, that it will feel like the dawn of a new day reveals everything has changed, right? So however that is, it might be really subtle for you, or very personal and not this big display. But I have a feeling that there's going to be a big display of some sort. And I would be really, if there wasn't, I'm not sure what that even means anymore. Does that mean nothing? I have no idea. So with that in mind, my friends, I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so very much. I shared with you all of the stuff that I'm offering right now, so you can also get all of that information from catalystenergies.net. It's truly the landing pad. You can also get on the mailing list that I have there, and you usually will know about these things way before everyone else when I send it out to the email list. It's about 3 emails a month, just letting you know what's current, what's active, what's being offered, not necessarily any spam. So that's something. Everything you need is actually going to be not only in the description box below, but at the website of catalystenergies.net. So, my friends, have a great weekend. Take very good care of yourself. For those doing the Reiki healing attunements, I will have the transmission out soon for today's attunement, and I've already sent out everything I need to the list about what to expect for the weekend. There will be no Starseed ministry on Monday the 19th. I know it seems like I should be here, but I won't. So we'll be together on Tuesday for the Starseed ministry on the 20th and check in and see how things are going by that point. So I love you guys. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other as best you can. I'll see you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Bye.